right, let's get going. Welcome to the community meeting for the OpenSearch project. It's Tuesday, October 1st, 2024. We have a couple of things to go through for the etiquette. Introduce yourself before speaking. I'm Chris Friedane. I'm the community manager for the OpenSearch project. If you can, mute yourself unless you're actively speaking. That keeps things quiet and functioning for everyone else. Cameras, of course, are optional. If you want to show your face on the screen, that's totally up to you. Bring in questions at any time in the chat or in the audio. Typically, if the presenter is presenting, it's kind of their, whether they answer them during or after. We'll see what Ashwin prefers today. And then, of course, disruptive folks, just keep things nice, everyone. For a couple of announcements, OpenSearchCon was a lot of fun last week. We had a massive influx of our community. We're always extremely thankful for everyone that shows up. Plenty of really good participation in both giving talks as well as asking questions and feedback during each of the sessions. And my personal favorite, the unconference that I run every year, had a lot of fun doing that again. Most of the videos are coming to our YouTube channel, so I'd recommend subscribing there and you'll see them as they launch. We have a few that the team is still working on publishing, and we're just, thank you again to the whole community for taking part in this year's North American OpenSearch Con. We did have one other announcement that I don't see listed here, but I think everyone probably saw. Happened September 16th in Vienna at Open Source Summit Europe. OpenSearch joined the Linux Foundation as a top-level foundation called the OpenSearch Software Foundation. You can see a big announcement about that on the opensearch.org blog. Read all about it. It's essentially putting our best foot forward for the open source community. It opens governance. It should bring in a lot more participation from the community. And this is done in a manner to ensure the long-term sustainability of the project from the entire open source community. So that was a huge one. Today's agenda, we have one thing to go over. That's the OpenSearch discovery and observability. Some of the changes that have happened, and looking for feedback from our friend Ashwin. And we're looking for different feedback from everyone on the call. We'll let him take over from here, kind of just see if he'd prefer to do questions and answers during or after. I'll hand it over to him now. Ashwin, if you want to share your screen, take it away.
All right. Hey, folks. Just want to give you a quick glimpse at what we've been working on in terms of creating Discover. If you've been following the OpenSearch Dashboards channel recently, you'll see there's a lot of activity around just overall changes we've been making to dashboards in terms of its ease of use, its look and feel, and then some of its core applications like Discover. I'm going to primarily focus on Discover changes right now, but overall, soon we're going to have a bunch of changes that are not just related to Discover, but across the whole OpenSearch Dashboards application that we're going to revamp how it works and feels and behaves. So any and all feedback regarding that, or do feedback on it on the dashboard repo itself or on the forums. So definitely do give it a spin. It's not like all of these features are behind feature flags. So if you fork the default version of dashboards, you will by default not see any experience. You'll be created with the exact same experience you've been used to so far. But what the view you're seeing right now here has a few feature flags that we turned on. For one, we have a new navigation flag that's available in advanced settings that turns on, that gives you this new layout for navigating through the application and up changes the header and everything. Another flag that was turned on was Discover specific, which we call query enhancements. The main reason for the flag being called that is because we now let you query using multiple different query languages inside primarily Discover today, but over time you'll be able to query with multiple different languages across the application. So bringing in support for multiple query languages, and also bringing in support for multiple different data types. So far on Discover, you can only search using OpenSearch in this index patterns. Now change that to also include indices and also S3 connections and more other types of data sources with adding over time. So for now, it's just these three types. So you can directly, you no longer require an index pattern to query open in Discover. You can just connect to the cluster that you have. And I'll explain that in a second. But you can select index that you have inside your cluster, select your time field, and select your language, and that's it. You basically have, so you can see over here, I've selected an index from the AOS 13 cluster, and then I've selected the language as SQL directly in Discover. Now I can already see all the documents available within that index in that cluster on Discover. And all the basic functionality works. We are slowly adding more functionality like adding click-based filtering, toggling, sorting. All of these other features are slowly coming in. But for now, you can at least start seeing a document without having to create an index pattern. You don't need write access permissions to do these things. We're adding a bunch of AI features. So depending on if your cluster already has some of these AI agents set up, you'll be able to not just query and see the data inside your index, but also generate the queries themselves. Let me try to do a quick demo of that. So right now, we call the feature Query Assist. It's only available on PPL languages. So you can see if I'm on a PPL, I can see that. If I search SQL, that feature goes away with our banner saying, hey, please try it on PPL. So what does that give you? You can do something like some of the frequency of flights in the last 9 months. And then you can see here's a query that's generated using my natural language prompt. And you can obviously edit this and make any changes if you think this is not the right query to output. But at the same time, it gives you a basic starter query to start modifying and creating a nice, useful query for your particular search use case. Another thing we've been adding to this is also autocomplete. So now I do have autocomplete for PPL, for SQL, and for Lucene. So all the major languages, and for DQL. So all the key languages we are now support these features. DQL is only currently supported by index patterns. So depending on what type of data you're looking at, you will have different features enabled. The default experience of index patterns and what Discover could do because of that still exists. It's only for the new features, we're slowly incrementally adding features. I want to take a pause here for a second and sort of get some thoughts and feedback from anyone on the call here about the features that we have, and before I go ahead to the next part of the walkthrough.
So this is just from adding a data source to some other OpenSearch cluster or an S3 bucket.
Yeah.
Does the info on the S3 bucket have to be in an index format, or can it parse something that's zipped, or what's the nature of the data that it's expecting on S3?
Yeah, that's a good question, Nate. So the way the integration between data sources is happening is through, that's another project that's happening by another parallel team called multiple data sources. So what we're doing there is that we have new types of data sources that you can just directly connect with no middleman in the picture anymore. Like today, we always required an OpenSearch cluster to make dashboards work. That is no longer a requirement. Some of the changes we're making with the multiple data sources team. So now we can actually just make a direct connection to, so we have an adapter that we've created and the community can create some separate adapters for storing all the metadata that OpenSearch dashboards needs into a different data source other than OpenSearch. So you could use, let's say, DynamoDB or something else. And once you take away that dependency, now you can just directly connect OpenSearch dashboards to any cluster or any other backend which has added support for it, like in our case, S3. So without any index or anything in between, as long as you connect to S3 AWS glue-based system, you don't need any more OpenSearch connections to kind of like query that.
Interesting. That's hot,
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah, and you can actually see that in this new data sources tab that we have. You can see all the existing OpenSearch connections that you have. You can set one as default. You can create something we call direct query connections. These are the ones where you can directly query the S3. Today, this works using this feature we have called Flint, which lets you connect to an S3 connection through an open source cluster, but that dependency is also going away with a newer feature that we're coming up with called direct query service. And that's basically a hosted service that lets you connect to an S3 or a CloudWatch or a security lake based endpoint. And again, over time, it's going to be a lot more. And you can just connect to that service and query against it, and that'll show up in this tab over here as well. So today, they're happening through an open source cluster. Tomorrow, they don't have to have that dependency either. But yeah, that's kind of how where you can set it up. I don't think here we have an option to add the data sources, but depending on your permissions and how it's set up, you will have an additional option to add and connect your new data sources in this tab.
That's rad.
Awesome. All right. So any other questions before I go back to the Discover door? Okay. So just want to call out a few more highlights of the features we've added to Discover. We'll try to keep the core functionality as close to the original goal intent as much as possible. So we haven't tried to change, for example, how the table behaves or how some of the layout options are, but we have been adding features incrementally on top of it because they are more useful for certain use cases. For example, when you start to do querying, like TQL, a single line editor, where you have this familiar filter bar, you have autocomplete. Like that. So we have all those familiar features, including your saved queries and everything. But also at the same time, when you are going to languages that require a lot more power, on the PPR, we have a new editor in place which lets you do multi-line editing. So that's very useful. And also at the same time, features like recent queries. So if you've run a complex query and you just want to see like what I run a few minutes ago, we have a cached list of like 5 to 6 of these that you always can see. And when you run a query, it also updates it and then adds to the top of the last run section. You now also see the completed time and the loading state in the editor itself, as opposed to seeing a small icon on the top right-hand side, which indicated that the query was still executing. And if the query takes more than a few seconds, we start showing you how long the query's been running for while it's loading itself. I don't have a ready demo to show for that, but yeah, you can take my word that actually works. And then we have this new AI assistance feature that we're also trying to add. Again, these are not the final implementation of final locations for some of these features yet, but we're just putting in place because we've often noticed that like if you're already in Discover and you select your data source, you want to create an anomaly detector, it's useful to jump off from here and take some of this context over into the new, either creating a visualization or anomaly detection. And we can carry the context over and let you start either creating an anomaly detector or generating a visualization from this existing search you're looking at. How much of the context we're carrying over is still something we're deciding, but again, this is where you can get feedback from you guys. Are we doing enough? Are we not doing enough? Etc. And along the same lines, even this response summary thing, we're right now, I think, summarized in the top N documents. I think it's 10 or something that we use to kind of generate a summary of the search. So many more features are still coming. We're not completely finished. All of the changes need to go in here, and we do have a few edge cases and bugs that we're still trying to iron out. But yeah, in general, this is the new Discover. It has a lot of cool new features. Just to give a highlight of them again, multiple different data sources, multiple different data types, multiple different query languages, autocomplete, a new query experience, and that query assistance. So yeah, overall, let us know what you think about these changes and give us your feedback.
What's the name of the feature flag that it's hidden behind? And is that a dynamic setting? Can we change that via API, or does that need to be done via the YML?
No, so this setting is intentionally kept as an advanced setting in the UI. So any user can go, and as long as they have admin permissions, they should be able to change the advanced setting. That being said, we have mostly tested this when, like I mentioned, the other flags that we have are also turned on. It shouldn't really break without them, but most of our testing has happened with all of the other flags that have been turned on. So let me actually go there real quick and show you. So search for query. This. Oh, query enhancements, sorry. Query enhancements. This is the flag. As you can see in this domain, we have turned on by default. Similarly, there's another flag called new homepage, which turns on the navigation changes that I've been talking about. So this use new homepage is a toggle for this new navigation scheme and header, etc. So this cover ideally works with both of these flags turned on. And two YML flags that also need to be turned on to completely use these again, the way you're seeing in the domain here. Workspaces as a feature needs to be turned on. And then multiple data sources as a feature needs to be turned on. Both of them are viable config-based flags. Again, none of these other flags I mentioned are required strictly for Discover to work. We just haven't tested with that yet. So if you're trying this feature out, just make sure the other flags I just mentioned are also turned on. Any other questions?
Can you talk a little bit about what this glue is? You've mentioned glue as like a technology keyword a couple of times. I'm not familiar.
Yeah. So glue is an AWS specific feature for S3 where we can dump our logs, etc., inside S3 as documents, and then use a glue layer in between to kind of describe how the formatting and the structure of the logs are, like how they would be for a database, so that we can use tools like Athena and EMR based jobs to do like a map reduce on S3 and get us data. So theoretically, what we're doing in Discover with the S3 stuff, you can do it manually yourself. It's just that you now have to run the job yourself, take its results, put it in an index, read the values, and then do everything they're doing. So the layer so what Amazon offers is this thing called Glue, S3 Glue, which lets you kind of describe this and treat your S3 as like a database, except that it works at S3 speeds. So what we're doing is because of that feature, we're able to now connect to a data source like that and perform, asynchronous operations that lets you trigger those commands to run those jobs and fetch the results and show it to the user without the user having to manually do any of those steps themselves. So that's what Glue is, and that's how we're using it for OpenSearch dashboards.
That's exactly what I needed. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for the question. That was a good one. Any other questions? I'm not covering. So we have other. I don't know if workspaces as a feature ever came up and talked over here, but a lot of the things we're talking about also built on top of the other changes we're also doing. So just want to quickly give a highlight to like workspaces, which lets you kind of like compartmentalize your work, allocate your saved objects, etc., to specific workspaces with different permissions. So users can switch between, and users can associate with multiple workspaces at the same time. Things like that are all there. I'm just not covering that because that's a whole different topic which needs its own discussion. But yeah, Discover should work on top of all of those features seamlessly and give you a lot more power to what you want to do on dashboards. Well, there's no other questions. That's basically all I had. Thanks, Chris, for having me come here and talk about this. I'll give it back to you.
Do you have any Q&A? Any other questions that the community has? Anyone want to bring anything up or ask questions about what was discussed or anything at all?
Even things related to OpenSearchCon, any comments or criticisms or things that, aside from the schedule, was there anything that anyone particularly enjoyed or disliked or anything?
I had a blast. I was telling everyone how much I love doing the unconference.
Yeah, it's becoming a tradition, isn't it?
It is. I love it.
I'll
Hope no
submit
one.
something one of these years. If I didn't fear everyone's judgment so harshly, I would probably submit an idea.
It's always fun, man.
Yeah.
So with that, I guess we'll give everyone some time back. Here's all of our different social areas that you can follow us. Come check out some user groups. I don't know where you are across the world, but we're starting one up in London soon. Another one in Paris. I think we've got another one. We've got a number of them scheduled. So come out to that link and you'll see a bunch of things happening in your area. If you don't see one in your area, reach out and let's talk about maybe starting one in your area. Otherwise, see y'all next time. Thanks for coming.